So he doesn't have a French passport. So he has a British one, but he's never lived there. So his identity is very strange in that sense. He's not an American. He's not an American citizen, but lives here. Not a French, passport holder, but was born there. He's British passport-wise, but never lived there.
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library.
What's interesting, I think, is it's the subtle cultural differences about how people converse. And, say the use of humour, I was talking about in the UK, a really important part of the British culture is humour, less so here. So that was kind of interesting just to kind of see that. And I find it a bit more tribal here, or have found it a bit more tribal. People belong to the same church, or went to the same university, or work at the same place, or go to the same golf club. And sometimes there felt like this divide, like they didn't quite know how do I speak to this person that isn't any of those things and is a bit of an outsider. So that's been kind of interesting just to bridge those divides. So it's been more subtle, I think, but definitely there, those differences. Yeah. And obviously just those subtle differences in language as well. The words, literally the words, the subtle differences in the words that we use, and just kind of having to learn what some of those things. I thought I knew some of the like I knew sidewalk was pavement, but there was a lot I just didn't know. I didn't know, if you know what I mean, until I kind of came here. So it's been learning, not a wholesale new language like in French, but it's been learning those subtle differences.
Right. Things are spelt
Yeah,
differently versus British English versus American English.
yeah,
Pronunciation
exactly.
is different. Different words are used for different things. Had to make that adjustment too. And then you're in the
Right,
DC metro area. That's
that's
very
right.
international, very international. Lots of
Yes,
international international
yeah,
organizations of people coming in and out, lots of diplomats from different countries. So I can
yes,
imagine it's quite a mix of like having to switch back and forth with the different cultures that you have to deal with.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's right. Oh, we've made friends with a lot of people that, again, primarily through my son. Going to the park after school and meeting them, and we've made friends with people from, again, different places actually, and again different places in the US. Because even within the US, a lot of people come to DC for work or this area, and a lot of people work in the government or in the military as well. Um, so even the US people that we meet, they're not necessarily locals. Um, so yeah, that's kind of diverse as well.
Okay, so you made the decision to transition from being a therapist into coaching. Is there a particular emphasis why you wanted to switch?
It was about, well, part of it was some just um, kind of the differences and the paperwork stuff and all of that side of things. The different systems. So I was qualified in the UK, and that was fine for Europe, not so the US. So there was that aspect of things, and kind of going through that process. And then the coaching thing, it just appealed to me, I think, in terms of okay, understand, well, what is that, and what people's expectations are of that, and how people find that, and um, I don't know, just something about broadening my offering that felt important to me, and how I work. I think the thing that I realized as well is how I've worked. I've pretty much always worked as a coach, or my practice has evolved into almost coaching anyway, because the first part of my work is goal setting, and it's future focused. That's always been, because I want to help people make change. I want to give people the tools that they can apply in their lives to make real, tangible, meaningful change. So all of that language has always really appealed to me, and I think that coaching side of things really appealed to me because of that.
So tell us what's the name of your coaching practice and then talk about your podcast.
Yeah, so my coaching practice can be found at, so it's WMA Expat Coaching. So WMAexpatcoaching.com is where you can find me. And yeah, so I've got a podcast as well, which is called On Being Good Enough. And the early episodes go through my process. So there's three parts to my process. There's the goal setting, which is the first part. Then understanding the barriers, we unpack them. And then I, teach a toolkit, a 4-step change process, which goes on about focus reset, self-compassion, very important, reframing how we look at situations, try and change that, and ultimately mindful, valued living. So doing things that are valuable, meaningful, and doing them mindfully. So the early episodes of my podcast On Being Good Enough goes through the process and then how we apply them to different things. And then I've kind of moved into doing 1 Minute Wisdom episodes 3 times a week. Which kind of, every Monday is now Expat Monday. So I talk about some expat experience stuff and then a bit about my work and some news as well in there. So that's all under On Being Good Enough, which can be found on all good podcast platforms.
Very good. And I've checked it out, folks. And, I really enjoy the short snack bite format that James uses, and lots of helpful information there if you're struggling, having adjustment challenges, finding some insights there. So check him out at On Being Good Enough, right? I found you on Spotify, but you're found
Yeah.
on all other locations where you get podcast feeds.
Yes, Apple Podcast, Apple, Amazon, Pocket Cast, all of those different ones. Yeah.
And are you on social?
Yep. So WMA Expat Coach, and you'll find me on Instagram, on X, on Facebook as well. So I'm there as well. So if anyone want to reach out with any questions or to get in touch, to have a chat, I'd always be happy and willing to talk with anyone, really, to help them.
Probably is pretty helpful being a coach as well, having practice as a clinical therapist. Like, can you tell us what was your area of study back in the UK when you got your qualifications?
So in the UK, you studied to become a counsellor therapist. So that was kind of, my focus was on a type of therapy called cognitive behavioural therapy. And then, so that's where my primary focus was, which is a kind of change therapy. Look at your cognition, so your thoughts, your beliefs, and your behaviors, and what isn't working, and then we want to try and change that. And that's where the goal setting kind of comes from. So that's still really with me from the cognitive behavioral therapy days. So that's what I specialized in. And then I've kind of, through sort of further training and kind of experience, really moved into acceptance and commitment therapy, which is another type of therapy. And that's where that self-compassion, that acceptance of our thoughts and our feelings come into it. So yeah, I've always been a behavioralist. That's how I describe myself. I'm a behavioralist. I want to help people make behavior change. I talk about the mirror test. That's really important to me. At the end of the day, can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I stand by the actions that I've taken today. They were in line with my values. They were in line with the person I want to be. So that's that real big part for me. I'm always trying to help people make that change.
Yes, and I actually had the pleasure of having a session with James here recently and really found it very meaningful, folks, with going through his process about the rooted mind and trying to make behavioral change, having self-compassion and doing that mirror test. So definitely recommend his way of practicing and coaching you along to bring positive change and working towards your goals.
Well, thank you for saying that, Simone. It was great to have that session with you. Yeah, that rooted mind, conscious mind. Just to say, it's kind of my whole approach is predicated on the two minds of. So we've got the conscious mind, where our wisdom, our kindness, our values, and our logic reside. That's us, and that's who we want to be in charge of making the choices of behavior. But we have the rooted mind, rooted in the past, in upbringing, in culture, evolution, genetics, generational trauma as well. And that's where our thoughts and feelings and urges are created. So they will try and the rooted mind will try and grab hold of the conscious mind, and we end up responding and behaving because of what the rooted mind is saying. So we want to try and get that separation. That's why the focus reset is that first step in my change process. So the conscious mind can be in charge and then can decide how to move forward. So that's really important to us. Then that's grounded in our values, that action.
Very good. I wonder over, like, moving from the UK to France and the US, is there any faux pas that you'd love to share with us? Anything humorous of your time living in two different countries that happened that today you laugh at yourself and, have a good kick with your wife over something that you probably messed up socially?
In France, it would often be language based. Just saying the wrong words. You're going for one word that would be an innocent, nice, correct word. Often it could end up sounding like a whole other word with a whole other meaning. There was a few of those occasions. I won't go into what those words necessarily were, but that can very much happen. Um, that can happen in America too. There's a few words that we use differently and have different meanings that can be somewhat crude in one nation that perhaps is less so in the other. That happens a lot. Um, yeah. In terms of faux pas, one, there was a faux pas, not so bad perhaps, but again, it's a cultural one. So the first children's birthday party I went to in the US was at someone's house. And having lived in France and being from the UK, what you do is you would take a drink. So I took a bottle of wine to a children's birthday party because in those two countries, that's what the adults would be doing. We'd enjoy a drink where the kids are. And of course, that doesn't happen in the US. So just everyone staring at me holding this bottle of wine. And then I realized that the drinks were just all soft drinks, or if you want a cup of coffee. So, yeah, taking a bottle of wine to a children's birthday party was something of a faux pas.
Yes, yes. Oh, I feel it. I feel it. And all the eyes looking at you, trying to figure out, like, what's he doing?
Yeah.
Wow. Did you all ever got around to talking about it and giving an explanation as to why you made that choice culturally?
Uh, no, I was too embarrassed. And they didn't really kind of explicitly say it. I didn't know them that well. So I was just like, just style it out and just walk away from it and yeah, just drink my soft drink with everyone else. Yeah. Yeah.
But really good explanation why something like that would happen, right? You're coming from two different
Yeah.
cultures where the adults are thinking, "Oh, we need to have a glass of wine while these children play and sort of enjoy ourselves at this party as
Because
well." But
it's really true. Because in France, actually, in France, we would go to the park after school, and all the parents would take wine and beer, and and we would have like charcuterie and cheese and like baguette, and that would be what we would do. So we'd go to the park. The kids are playing. Take a picnic blanket, but everyone's having a glass of wine and a beer in the park. And again, that's very different here. People don't drink outside here. People don't drink in the park here. And yeah, and in the summer I went back to the UK, and it was my niece's birthday party, and that was in a park. And I went there, and there was prosecco, champagne flowing, and it was a Thursday night. And by 7 o'clock, the parents were like, "We've got school tomorrow. We probably should take the kids home." Because again, that cultural relationship with drinking is very, very different than here. Obviously, it's 21 here, and I've stopped drinking since I've moved here because it doesn't. People don't really do it so much here. Whereas in the UK and in France, it's so social. If you want a social life, you go to the pub or you go to the bar or the restaurant. That's where social life is based around in the UK and France, and here less so.
well, that's interesting that you're making that comparison there because for me, coming from Jamaica, I felt like there's more drinking in the US compared to where I was raised. And I found it,
Okay.
it was a bit of a culture shock for me having after work people going out to the bars or doing the whole bar hopping thing. I just couldn't
Right.
get into it because that's not how I was raised. I was more so around among family. Even if neighbors or friends came over, we would be in a home setting, lots of cooking,
Right.
lots of non-alcoholic beverages, but also alcoholic beverages. Like, we grew up getting a little bit of, alcohol in certain drinks, and it was really not a big deal. Like from a young, young
Mm.
age, like
Mm.
teenager,
Yeah.
it's mixed into like the carrot juice or some sort of a punch or something. And it was okay for us to have a little bit just growing up. So it was more normalized. So the big
Yes.
craze in the US around getting to be 21 and finally being able to drink, it's such a big deal on college campuses or with young
Right.
people that it wasn't really a
Yes.
thing for us. So it's interesting now that I'm learning that drinking is actually more widely accepted or is done more of on a cultural level than the US. That's so interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's the perception. That's why it's really interesting. This is again why I love working with different cultures because of those things. Like for example, I go and play soccer here for a little while, but been injured. But you go and you play soccer and you leave again. Whereas in the UK, you would go to a place that would have a bar in it. And what you would do is after you've played soccer, you would then go to the bar and everyone would have a chat. So that's where you would socialize. Whereas here, it's on a field that actually belongs to a school. So you go there and then you just leave again. So it's again just where that is part of it or not.
Okay, yeah, I guess it's just how it's kind of set up because it's the second time I'm hearing you mention like the end of a walking trail, there's a pub for you to stop and have a nice
Yeah.
drink and enjoy something. And then you're saying again, if you go somewhere else, there's like a pub nearby and people just hang out at the end of the game to have a drink and to socialize. So it's kind of built into the culture, I suppose.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's different here
absolutely.
in the US, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely.
How has your son adjusted to being born in France, having two parents from the UK, and now living in the US? Like, has he had any particular challenges as a child making new friends and like building community for all of you?
No, he's been brilliant. He's really social, which we're very lucky and grateful for. You know, that he just made friends really quickly in his new school here. Um, Thankfully, there was no bullying or anything like that. Again, maybe kind of relatively international, even though it's just a public school, it's relatively diverse. So that was good. Um, yeah, so he's really gotten on well with other kids and made a good group of friends, which is fantastic. He is interesting because he's a British citizen, but he's never lived in the UK because he wasn't entitled for French citizenship because being born in France
Oh,
isn't enough. So he doesn't have a French passport. So he has a British one, but he's never lived there. So his identity is very strange in that sense. He's not American. He's not an American citizen, but lives here. Not a French, passport holder, but was born there. He's British passport wise, but never lived there. Um, so yeah, so it's really interesting. I think so different to I grew up, in the same city that my parents grew up in. He's now got this experience of this third kind of country in his life.
yeah, he's definitely a third culture kid. English at home with both parents, but yet when he was living in France, he's going to a French school, immersed in the
Yes,
French culture, learning French. And now he's in the US learning American English, going to an
yes,
international school, and trying to maintain his French. So, my gosh, he's
yeah,
quite
and
the
also
third culture
just
kid.
to complicate his life, we put him in the Spanish immersion program. So half the day he's being taught in Spanish. So he's got Spanish, French, British English, and American English. So the complication has been there actually, for his developmental, side of things has been a bit slower in some aspects, like kind of the English, learning English. Um, so that's been harder because his brain obviously has different sounds, different ideas. So that's probably been the tough part. and you kind of get conflicting advice. Everyone says in the long term it's great, he's got exposure to all these different things, but in the short term there are some struggles which we've had to, help him out with. But yeah.
Wow, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your international professional journey, right? Would you be considered a trailing spouse, of your wife? Because
Yeah.
her career seems to be driving the way, right? So you're a trailing
Yes,
spouse, and
absolutely. Yeah, I think I am advantage.
so it's awesome that your career kind of a perfect match, really, because you can also work. You don't necessarily have to be dependent on finding work wherever you go.
Yes.
All you have to do is get yourself established as a therapist or counselor or a coach, and you can
Yeah.
easily find meaningful work.
Yes. Yeah. No. Exactly. So I'm very fortunate that I've got this very international client base. Spread all over the world still, from Australia and China to the US and the UK and France. A lot of people still in France. So I'm very fortunate that my clients are around the world. So with technology, I've got that client base, and as I continue to grow here in the US.
Very good, very good. Well, best of luck to you, James, in your practice. It was great to connect. Of course, we'll stay connected at Unalignable. And thanks for sharing your work with us. And for those who are, whether you're overseas or find yourself in the midst of, some serious challenges adapting to your new country, wherever you find yourself in the world, here we are sharing Mr. James Wilson and his practice with you so you can get some help adjusting to your new environment, whether you're an international professional, an expat, international student, or there's a lot of people moving across the globe these days in different roles. So get the support that you need, get the help. There are people out there who can relate to your experience and help you maybe land a little bit softer as you move across the world.
Well, thank you very much. It was lovely chatting with you today, Simone. And yeah, I'm here if anyone wants to reach out.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining. We'll get all of Mr. Wilson's details and share that in the show notes for you all, so you're able to connect with him as you wish moving forward, and check out his podcast on Being Good Enough. And then again, the name of your practice online is?
So WMAexpatcoaching.com.
Very good. We thank our listeners around the world, and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.